Ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? Welcome to The Flow Within. My name is Tony G. Thanks for joining us. Today I'm joined by two amazing musicians who are working on several projects together. I'm joined by Anastasia Canfield and Peter Hirschhorn. Anastasia and Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you guys in here. Well, we're just going to jump straight in. So Anastasia, why don't you just walk us through what music was like growing up or what got you into music?
Yeah. So there really was... music has always been a part of my life. My mom is a visual artist and also a pianist, and so it's always been present for as long as I can remember. She started teaching me kind of some piano basics whenever I was really, really young. I remember kind of walking around the house and like making up songs, just singing about random things that I was like seeing as a child. And then I started formal piano lessons after that, and joined band. And I guess what kind of got me into music was just living in a musical household. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know what that was going to mean for my life, but I knew that music was going to be something that I did forever. Like it was just always going to be a part of my life. And growing up, I didn't know, extensively what the music industry was had to offer. Oftentimes you're exposed to music education, especially if you're in some sort of like formal lessons or band or something. You're exposed to music education, you're exposed to performance. And so that was kind of what I thought the music world was going to look like for me. And then whenever I got into college, I studied music and was exposed to music therapy and some other aspects of the music industry. And yeah, I think that's probably where it all started.
And I understand that you play a lot of instruments as well.
I do.
Why don't you run us through that list of these instruments that you play?
Piano is my primary instrument.
Excellent.
I also play high brass, so trumpet and French horn. Those are probably what I'm most proficient in. I also sing, play guitar, ukulele, accordion, auxiliary percussion, but he's really the percussionist. And proficient in a lot of different things. And I am always looking to learn something new. And kind of once you have the basics of an instrument, particularly an instrument like piano, that is very, you can be very familiar with music theory, and it's easy to pick up a lot of different things after that once you have kind of that foundation too.
Awesome. And Peter, right back at you. What got you into music?
Somewhat similar beginnings. My mom was a piano player. She basically made sure growing up I was always involved with some sort of music lesson, some sort of music something. Mm-hmm. It really kind of, so I started on piano and then went through guitar and then drums, and it really started taking off once I got into high school. I ended up joining band and marching band and winter percussion over there. I kept doing it, diving deeper. Eventually it was like, yeah, this seems like the thing for me to be doing. So I took that to college, ended up getting double majoring in music performance with the focus on percussion, classical percussion, concert percussion, and music composition. Okay. And then I also spent a lot of time in the marching arts and the pageantry arts, where after college I ended up teaching and I'm still teaching after school percussion with marching bands and winter percussion programs, and then recently the last year and a half or so I started getting involved more with with Occam's Rose, our duo, Then I Fly, our ska band, diving more into drum set, these kind of more performance hand drum percussion, as well as guitar and a little bit of piano as well.
Nice. So what roles do you play in both these bands? Are they both the same percussion roles? Are you playing like kit in one? Are you playing more auxiliary in another?
Yeah, so I play drum set in Then I Fly. Strictly. That's what I do there. Occam's Rose, because we're both multi-instrumentalists, it's a little bit more flexible. So I'm about 50-50 between playing a cajon, which is a box with snares on the inside, djembe, and then I also play guitar.
Oh, very cool. And so you play with a few different projects as well. So you guys play with the two projects, and you also are involved with a few other projects as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Talk about the roles that you play with these other projects as well.
Yeah. So Occam's Rose and Then I Fly are both original music projects. I also play keyboard and guitar with a Guns N' Roses cover band called Appetite for Destruction. We had our first show last Saturday, and it was awesome. I also sit in with some other projects from time to time, namely my friend Airly Michelle's project, playing keyboard. I'm also curating a benefit concert that's going to be on March 5th that I was fortunate to be able to handpick handpick the band, really. Peter's also playing in that too. And some of my other friends, a guitarist, a bassist, and a saxophonist, are all going to be playing cover songs, like female pop cover songs for that. And then I also play in a all-female punk cover band. We haven't played any gigs yet. We're still kind of in that process. Putting together parts and just jamming together. But that one's a lot of fun because I get to play all sorts of different things in that. Some guitar, trumpet, accordion, banjo. I sing in that. It's fun to just get to showcase all of the different weird things that I do. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the novelty of that one. But mostly it's piano for probably the majority of these projects, or at least that's where I start from, and then might branch out from there.
Okay, I like it. Walk me through what it's like playing in these different projects with your different roles, because sometimes you're the front woman, and sometimes you're playing more of a supporting role. Which do you like more, or why do you like each one specifically, and what reasons do you like them in their own kind of regard?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely, it's always really raw and vulnerable to perform your own original music. And I have, maybe not always, but definitely in my adult life, struggled significantly with performance anxiety. My second master's thesis was actually about music performance anxiety. And oftentimes whenever I am performing, I'll actually be wearing shades, and people, it works out because people think, it's just like a stage aesthetic, whatever, stage presence sort of thing, which is a nice deferral from the actual reason that I wear them. And it's like there's this barrier between me and the audience that I really kind of have to have, or else I just go blank. One of my first juries during my undergrad, your jury panel is sitting there, and then they request pieces, or they request etudes or whatever they need you to play, and they requested a piece that I just completely went blank on, and it was I actually said, like, can I play this other piece instead, and then come back to it, because it was terrifying, and I was like, I have to do something. I cannot for the life of me remember this piece right now. And fortunately, they were gracious enough to let me do that, and I was able to come back to the other piece, and it was fine. But that's whenever I started to realize, maybe there's something to this. So that definitely comes up with the original music, particularly Occam's Rose, since I'm the front person. Well, we're both front people for that. I think we share a very equitable role, at least. So there's a caveat there, I guess, of like, it's awesome to be able to perform my original music, and there's a huge catharsis with that, but it's also terrifying. And that's whenever the performance anxiety is probably the most palpable. But then on the other hand, I also like accompanying, because as a pianist, that's part of your education. If you're performing, you're an accompanist, as well as a solo performer or a chamber performer. And so that's fun in its own right because I get to support other really amazing musicians, like an Appetite for Destruction. I definitely play a supporting role, which is a lot of, which one takes a little bit of pressure off. Still wear the shades, but it's fun to be to play off of other people in the band, which you can as a front person too, but there's something different, like whenever the lead singer is coming up on the risers with you and kind of jamming out, like there's a different sort of vibe with that. And there's a lot more opportunities that you have whenever you can also be performing original music and being a front person, as well as being open to being a supporting role, being, playing what other people want to play. And so it's lucrative too, to be able to do that. And it's, I get to meet a lot of really awesome musicians because everybody's looking for a good keyboardist, fortunately.
Definitely.
But yeah, so I mean, I love them both for different reasons, and sometimes the same reason. I don't have as much performance anxiety with being a supporting role, but there's not quite as much, catharsis that, it's just not quite as much me whenever I'm performing someone else's music or performing for a cover band, but it's still a lot of fun.
All right, we're definitely going to come back to crippling stage anxiety here in a minute, but first, Peter,
Okay.
what's your stage experience like?
First of all, I do want to say for the record that if you watch her perform, you would not know that she has crippling stage anxiety. I feel like that should be very well known. It's been my experience. I mean, it's been, again, more relatively recent. I've played large crowds in the marching arts where you're one of a large number of people on a field or a floor. Excuse me. And then there's hundreds to 1,000 people in the crowd, which is its own, kind of rush. But then, being behind a solo mic drum kit where, you hit the kick drum and it shoots out to the street, it's a really cool experience. And, I definitely prefer, for the most part, being in that supportive role, but in addition to not having any singing capabilities. That's not really a spotlight I necessarily look for.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's definitely moments in both projects where I can kind of step forward and take the floor a little bit. But yeah, it's super fun. They're super, super different. The ska band, obviously, it's very high energy, very intense. A little bit more kind of, at least on my part, a little more virtuosic in the technical aspects of, playing fast punk drum beats. And then just being a part of like that kind of raw, more kind of up close and personal experience with Occam's Rose. It's a lot of fun. A really fun thing about Occam's Rose is that we're a pretty diverse duo, as far as playing original music, covers, the recordings. Some of them I play drum set on, and we get bass guitars and some more instrumentation going on. So we've done iterations of the project where we get a couple more people on stage with us, and do more of a full band production. And then there's times when we're totally stripped down, playing at a farmer's market or in a coffee shop. And so it's also a really fun and unique experience being able to take the same music, the same songs, and perform it for a variety of audiences in a variety of different formats and different arrangements, if you will.
Definitely. What's your cohesion like on stage, either of you?
I think we get on all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're okay. No, I think that like we, and I guess I'll kind of speak for Peter with this too. Like we play off of each other really well. Like there's a lot of times that, especially with our respective day jobs and things, we're just really, really busy. But then we have a series of gigs coming up that we just don't ever get to practice as much as we would like to for. And we might make like a verbal plan of like, okay, this is like, you know, this is the roadmap of like what we're going to do. But a lot of our performance, at least recently, has been just playing off of each other on stage, like just listening to each other and just being very, very kind of in that flow state together. I think when we were on tour in December, we went to North Texas for a few shows. And I think that really was when a lot of that stuff was solidified. I mean, definitely before that too, but, you like tour can make or break a band for sure. And I think that was definitely a make scenario for us. And we write together, we record together, we do a lot of things together. We spend just a lot of time in general together. And that also comes out on stage, I think, in how we interact, how connected we are in that way. And so it's kind of a joke, like, you're all right, because we're actually very, very close otherwise, both musically and personally.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, especially with a project like a duo where it is not only intimate, but it's also, you know, it's if one person's off, the duo's off.
Definitely.
You know, and it's very exposed because there's just at any given time two instruments plus a voice going, and you know, it's in some ways with a larger band, it's easier to sort of hide away and be in this comfort zone of like, I'm doing my thing, I hear all the noise around me, so even if, you know, it's not necessarily a real thing, like especially even like playing drum set. Obviously, if I mess up, that's going to cause a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. But there's this sort of safety net that's kind of fabricated when you have more people around you. Really in any situation, whether it's music or not, when you're surrounded by people doing a similar thing, you feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. Right? It's why it's easier to talk to people if you're like part of a group than if you're just by yourself with a bunch of people listening to you. And with that, the duo, we have to be on it and have to have this cohesion for it to work. So I think we're really fortunate that we do get on so well, that we are so close as musicians, and personally, that we can really trust each other to make all the musical decisions on the moment and everything happen, and still everything feels good to us and hopefully to the audience as well.
Awesome. So along those lines, you also prepared a song for us today that we're going to listen to, right? Why don't you walk us through that?
Okay. Well, Losing Sleep is actually the first collaboration that Peter and I did. It was actually recorded before we decided, before we established Occam's Rose. We established Occam's Rose kind of as like, you know, we wrote this song together, we recorded it together, and we don't really see like a reason to not continue playing and writing together, so let's make this a thing, like Peter had said earlier. And so we established Occam's Rose, and then like right around that time is whenever we released Losing Sleep. And it is it started with something that I had written kind of very skeleton, bare bones a few years ago, about the sort of rumination that you experience whenever you have had some sort of interpersonal strife. So whether that's with a romantic partner or whether that's with someone else that you love in any capacity, and the and like if you think about like that one big fight that you had, and then you like you're playing it through your mind at night or whenever, like, and you can't sleep, it's just kind of taking you over. That's what losing sleep is about. So it's kind of wondering what is going on in that other person's mind, what is going on in that other person's world. How have I contributed to this, like this downfall of our relationship, or like what could I have said differently? What could they have said differently? That all of those questions that just play over and over in your internal dialogue whenever you're struggling with someone that you really, really deeply care about. And it's very cyclical. The song's very cyclical in nature, and I'll let Peter talk about some of the other compositional things, but the harmonically and in terms of instrumentation, there's a lot of things that will come into what you can hear and then will leave, but then come back. Like there's a ticking sound. I'll let Peter talk about that. And some other kind of cinematic aspects of the song that are intended to showcase like the passing of time, or that time is maybe even irrelevant, you know, and that this issue is just being played over and over again in your mind, in that rumination.
Peter, you want to elaborate on the...
Yeah, sure. So yeah, when we were just kind of getting started as a duo, Anastasia was showing me a couple different ideas and previous songs she kind of touched on, and she played this one for me, and I was like, yeah, this is a good song. This is a good start for sure. And when we decided to take it to the studio, and then we started kind of diving into it and working on it more, it was really fun to really play with the cyclical nature of it, this sort of almost like we wanted to kind of dive into the idea of like it almost going one too many times of any given moment where it's like you can't get it out of your head. The idea of, you know, counting sheep, losing sleep. Over and over and over and over. And so we played with some effects with like, you know, a ticking now, like a stopwatch or alarm clock kind of sound that kind of comes in and comes out. Some of these sort of cinematic backing feelings, some more like the bridge, it gets to this really open chorale kind of part, where it's just layers of Anastasia's voice, which I think is it's a cool effect, not just because I think it sounds neat, but also kind of embodies that idea of like all these voices in your head and you're just kind of stuck there. I think, I mean, I'm very proud of what we did with this track. I think one of my favorite things about it is that as we talk about all these kind of effects and drama and cinematics and like, yeah, that cinematic effect sort of that we dived into, you can still feel the raw sound of just the voice and the guitar kind of throughout for the most part. And that still has that sort of like, it's just me by myself thinking about things sort of feel, even as we add these layers and as we make some unorthodox musical choices with it, which I can take the blame or responsibility for, because being, you know, studying music composition, half of that degree is looking at the avant-garde artists and being like, what's a weird thing they did that you can do, and let's see weird things that can happen, and like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. So yeah, so there's some fun choices that fortunately I had the freedom to play around with before then in the studio, and yeah, it's a fun line we start to kind of toe a little bit with going out of the box, but still keeping that, you know, singer-songwriter, I've got a guitar and I'm singing on stage feel.
Excellent. All right, well, let's check out Losing Sleep by Occam's Rose.
Losing sleep, losing sleep, counting sheep, counting sheep, losing sleep, losing sleep, counting sheep, counting sheep, losing sleep. I wonder how long it will just won't come true.
Awesome. There's a lot of intentionality in that song, which I really enjoyed. Whoa, I'm coming through the PA. I don't want to come through the PA. We good now? All right. There's a lot of intentionality in that song that I really enjoyed. I get kind of like a little bit of like a Radiohead feel from it, little ambient, just kind of. I could definitely just kind of listen to that.
Yeah.
I could definitely feel myself listening to it very intentionally, or just kind of catching myself being lost in it, and then kind of like coming back into it. So I think it's a very nice, not just a song, but I think it's a very nice feel. So thank you guys so much for sharing that with us. Yeah, it's really, really great. I've been more and more listening to a lot more kind of ambient music like that lately as I'm getting out of like my death metal phase. It's been really nice to listen to stuff like that, so we'll definitely have to check you guys out. So coming back to a little bit of the more mental health aspect of this, I want to come back to you, Anastasia, about your crippling stage performance anxiety.
Yeah.
And why don't you walk us through what steps you take to try to overcome it, or what maybe if you have a pre-show ritual, or if there's something that you do to just really try to center yourself and then just give your all when you're on stage.
Yeah. So I think it definitely looks a little bit different in different contexts. In a classical music context, I can't put on the my version of Sasha Fierce with the shades and stuff. Like I have to be the classical performer, which is scary in a lot of different ways. But really, whenever it comes down to it, performance anxiety often comes from a place of like one experience with like either rejection or some sort of some difficulty with critique, or like heavy-handed critique or something, or even an intersection, identifying with an intersection that is not very well represented in whatever industry it is that you're experiencing that anxiety. And so as a female musician, professional female musician, there's on average only 1 in 4 musicians identify as female. And so very overrepresented in the male aspect of that, and very underrepresented as a female. And that definitely comes out in how I expect to have to portray myself. I have to also think about what am I wearing and what does my makeup look like and stuff like that a lot more, I think, than my male counterparts. What is my visual, like how do I look just in general? On top of, do I have my shit together with with what I'm actually playing and what I'm writing and stuff. And so I say that because there is often a lot more there's a lot more to performance anxiety than what people initially think. It's not just stage fright, if you will. There's often a significant, experience or like socialization in someone's life that impacts their performance or impacts their anxiety going into performance. And that doesn't mean that someone who is part of some sort of like dominating or majority culture does not also experience that. I don't want to diminish that by any means, but it's definitely much more common with someone whose intersections are not well represented in that industry. And so I guess learning more about performance anxiety has been, number one, the most helpful for me. Like I said, I did my second master's thesis on performance anxiety, which is where a lot of this, information is coming from. And so I guess kind of knowledge is power in a way, and just reminding myself of there's statistics that, that show I'm underrepresented, but also in a way, I can flip that in my brain of because of that makes me stand out a little bit too as a performer. I have intersections that aren't well represented, and so I can choose to represent them in the way that I want to. And for other people who share my intersections too. So kind of some mind games of this is flip the script a little bit. The shades are a big thing whenever I'm performing in more pop contexts. I unfortunately can't wear shades whenever I'm performing classical piano, but at weddings I can usually get away with it because, a lot of times they're outside. So, there's that, but in other contexts, not so much. The shades do help though, because for some reason, whenever I can see people's eyes, that's the thing. That's whenever I go blank, when I see the whites of people's eyes watching me, it's it just becomes that much more real. And so the shades provide some sort of barrier. Also, a routine. I have to make sure that I have some sort of coffee or energy drink or something. I have to be energized before going on stage, and well rested. A lot of these things are just kind of just general performance things. Just making sure my body's in a good spot. Having eaten, but not too close to performing, is that just doesn't bode well. And I'm fortunate enough to be in bands with a lot of people that I'm very, very close with, that I love very deeply and so much. And so just kind of leaning into we get to do this, not we have to do this, or this is, we get to do this together. And so trying to focus on what really, the people on stage with me as well. But there's it's always there, and it's always something that I experience. I know Peter's seen that so many times, from me, and it's more something that I've learned how to endure, not necessarily something that's gone away over the years. In fact, it's probably gotten worse in some respects.
Oh, really?
But now I have more tools and more knowledge to mitigate it.
I was going to say, obviously you're working past it because you play with 6 projects, so it's not like you're not going to be on stage anytime soon. Obviously you're going to be performing a lot.
Sure.
So it's something that you obviously come to grips with and just push through, which is really admirable, because I know I have a lot of friends who are incredible musicians, but they'll never ever play on stage because they just can't get past that initial point of being able to do it comfortably. And I totally understand. The first time I went on stage, I can't even tell you how nervous I was. I think I was holding my guitar and I was just shaking uncontrollably. It took me 2 or 3 songs to just really even be able to play my instrument. So I know exactly what it can feel like.
That public emoting is, especially in this society, we're so closed off with our emotions and with mental health in general and stuff like that. And that's, as an artist, that's the complete opposite of what you're doing. You are going out there and you're flashing your emotions basically in front of however many people. And so there's a lot of trust and a lot of vulnerability there, and a lot of ways that other people, can kind of take advantage of that and can manipulate that. There's I've been fortunate that I've never been booed off stage or anything, but like that happens. Or there's people who will, write really poor reviews of someone's music online and stuff like that. And like that rejection of someone's performance, and particularly I think performing of original music is like a critique on who you are. It's not just, like a typical 9-to-5 desk job, like, oh, rewrite this, this memo or something. Like, there's some rejection with that too, but it's like the memo's the memo, whatever, it's external. But whenever you're performing, and if there is some aspect of your performance that doesn't go well, or even if it does and someone just doesn't like it and is very vocal about that, that's like, it's hard not to take that incredibly personally because you're so invested in what that is. Also, whenever you're a musician, you're really any artist, but particularly performing artist, there's so much behind the scenes that goes on, so much practicing and preparation and set list making and composition and recording time and all of these things. There's so much time and like financial and mental, emotional investment that you put into your music that is not necessarily represented in our performance. Like there's numerous days, weeks, months, years, lifetimes that you spend perfecting your craft that, someone will maybe see for an hour and a half, and then they'll judge you based on that. Yeah. And so that's part of something I think too that plays out in performance anxiety is like, one, have I prepared enough? And like, that's something that like always plays into my mind is like, have I practiced enough? And I think as a classical musician, first, that very much comes from a place of like, the week of juries, you just don't sleep. You are like, you're maybe taking a nap in a practice room or something like, but like you devote your life to that. But an average audience member in, just some bar or club does not know that side of you. They just know what they see on stage and whether they like it or not, and don't always think about how that, what they say or do or how they respond or react impacts the artist.
Definitely. Peter, any pre-show rituals of your own?
Not really. Again, I live much more comfortably in that a little bit further backstage, so to speak. Obviously I'm very attentive to making sure, or attempting to make sure I've got everything I need ready to go. Fortunately, actually, from my time teaching, I've had a lot of experience adapting to situations because things go wrong a lot when you're prepping for performances, especially as a teacher, and you're trying to manage all the different moving parts there. And so I had some sort of, I don't want to say epiphany, but like just catharsis of just like, okay, if it's out of my control, it's gone. It's not what I'm focusing on. So I need to make sure I've gotten decent sleep the night before. And generally speaking, the first 4 or 5 songs of every show, I'm really focused on what I'm doing and the people around me, and just basically shutting off the audience. And then once I'm kind of more comfortable in that space, it opens up. And as I've been doing this longer, that amount of comfort time has gotten shorter. Like, I mean, the first show I played with Then I Fly, I barely looked up the whole time beyond just like getting cues. I was not, I was very nervous. But it definitely has gotten better over time. And, for my classical training, less about a mental standpoint, but from a physical standpoint. Things like muscle memory and repetition are super helpful, so that when your brain goes blank, you have some muscle memory to kind of fall back on until your brain can catch up with the moment again. And trying to remember some of the techniques, like for, trying to use, when you're more nervous, it's helpful to use bigger muscle groups, which isn't super helpful for guitar because it's still your fingers.
Or piano.
But, like that was one thing that one of my teachers talked about when we were working on concert snare drum pieces, which are like some really, really like intense, minute details at these very, very soft dynamics where you're playing very, very finessed lines. And, we were taught for the most part, like this was like the first couple years of like, these are your fine motor groups that you need to use to make these happen in the right way. And then everything kind of turned around. One of my teachers was like, yeah, use bigger muscle groups for that spot. Because even though it's not going to be as technically correct, it's going to be much safer to play. So it's a little more tiring that way sometimes, obviously, especially with drum set. And again, now I'm a little further past some of those points and some of the higher finesse. Again, I'm playing punk music too, so it's not quite as high finesse, but having those kind of that muscle memory to fall back on is something I definitely rely on. And then, it's really just, for me, the biggest thing is just repping it so much that I can just be comfortable with it. Like, there's a couple songs I play guitar on where there's like a little solo moment. Sometimes it doesn't go well still, but for the most part, like the first few times, like I was also basically like shaking as I'm trying to get through the line. And so usually during those times, it's taking a breath, either depending on the day, sometimes it's shutting the audience out. Sometimes it's deliberately just like opening and just being like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. This is what it's going to be, because there's nothing you're going to do beyond that. And the second option there is more muscle memory, where it's just like, all right, we're just going to do it. It's going to be what it's going to be. Let's see what happens. And it's mostly working out now that I've been practicing. So
Yeah, practice makes perfect.
That actually made me think of something too, and that I think that with Occam's Rose, we kind of lean into this a little bit more, well, definitely a lot more than I Fly, but like our improvisational skills. And that's something that one was actually really scary for me to start to develop, which probably it wasn't until grad school that I was like really leaning deeply into more improvisation outside of like any sort of jazz context or something. But I know that there have been times that, things on stage don't necessarily go as planned. And so but you can't stop. And so you just improvise until there's until there's a spot where we can like get back on track and realign and continue. There's definitely been times that I've been playing stuff, and particularly guitar, that for whatever reason, especially if I'm switching guitars, I typically play on a classical guitar. So if I'm playing on his guitar, his acoustic, then my hands are just not, it messes with my brain. And so, like if I miss something, then I'll just kind of play for a little while and like whisper to him, like just one more round through the progression or something. Or if I forget lyrics or something, just one more time through, like, and kind of make those decisions on the fly, that I think can also, I mean, it feeds into that anxiety a little bit in the moment, but it also in the long run is a really good skill to like not necessarily let that show. So if you're like watching a recording or something later, like know where it happened, but usually it's pretty smooth. And that's something that I thought about whenever you were talking about like kind of the adaptations that you have to make, because I think that's another adaptation that we just really naturally do. and don't always think about, but it definitely happens on a fairly regular basis, at least for me.
I think that actually attests to like falling back on your training too. Because we both have gone to school for music and are fortunate to have that background. So I don't know if this is an advice podcast or not, but but yeah, that's the idea of just like repetition, practicing, working on your skill, working on your craft, being comfortable with your instrument. The more you have that, rather than being like, okay, I need to learn this song. Okay, now I'm going to learn this song. Okay, now I'm going to learn this song. Thinking, I'm going to learn the fundamentals so that if things do go wrong, I can fall back and still be comfortable. And we've been very fortunate that we both have these backgrounds where, there's been times we've gone out of the show just like, oh, there were like 8 things that went wrong. And then we talked to people in the audience. They're like, that sounded great. That was one of your better shows. And, the echelons of what's good and what's bad aren't necessarily the same.
Especially between us musicians and non-musicians.
Right,
We notice all the
exactly.
nitpicky stuff.
For sure.
Now, to be fair, there's obviously there's things that can go wrong that can be very obvious, and that that doesn't mean that's not like an excuse to not try or practice or learn the songs or what have you. But it also kind of falls in line with what Anastasia was saying earlier about people not seeing the work that goes in behind the scenes. Kind of sometimes takes forms in ways that the average person would not even have any clue that, like, they're watching something and then there's like a moment where something changes and the artist can maybe pinpoint like, oh yeah, that was like my second semester in college that helped me get through that 30 seconds of music there. But it's definitely interesting that artists are in this field that is so dependent on the perception of others for our living, and also that, generally speaking, those are also like, that's where people are the most comfortable being critics. I'd say alongside with comedians, there's not really any other fields that kind of work that way.
Definitely. Well, I really appreciate both of you guys being here. Before we take off, why don't you share with us where we can find all of your music?
Yeah. So Occam's Rose is on all streaming sites, Spotify, Apple Music. We also have a website, occamsrose.com, OCCAMSROSE.com. We're all over social media and stuff. Then I Fly is, you can look up our music anywhere that you stream music as well. And on social media, Appetite for Destruction is on social media. We don't have any recordings, unfortunately. And then we individually have our separate like music pages, music websites and stuff, AnastasiaRoseMusic.com and PeterHmusic.com, right? Is that right? Okay. Yeah, you can actually probably find all of our projects from our individual pages because we have links to all of that stuff there. Yeah, and then we have contact forms and emails and stuff that if people want to reach out, they're all on those websites.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your vulnerability and, of course, the insights into what it's like being a musician on stage and, of course, behind the scenes. So thank you guys so much for being here with us today. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Tony G, with The Flow Within. Thank you guys so much for being here. We'll see you next time.